Are white Republicans more racist than white Democrats?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. No spoilers yet.
Sorry.
We're gonna work through this question ourselves. But I think if you polled most people, they'd probably say, yeah, all else being equal, they're more racist. But that is a hypothetical poll. We have real polls. It's called the General Social Survey. The GSS has been conducted for decades now, and they ask many different questions about American society, American politics, and so we can look at that data and derive a little bit about the nature of racism. And so now we're going to look at some of the questions that tap into racial animus, as they call it, and try to see if white Republicans are in fact more racist than white Democrats. So let's bring up this first chart. Whites who say they would not vote for a black president. So this is obviously a relevant question in recent years. Now look at those lines. You see blue for the Democrats, red for the Republicans, going all the way back from Obama's first election to 1972. And those numbers are not as far apart as you might have expected them to be.
No, what's interesting also is if you look at 1988, you see a spike in that Democratic line to over 22%, maybe 23, 24%. That's the year Jesse Jackson ran for president. And those are white Democrats saying that they would not vote for a black president.
Nice.
Do you think the 94 to 08, is that some sort of lingering fear of Colin Powell, maybe?
I don't. You mean the
like
Republicans? But no, I just think that there's a divisiveness, and I think that with a lot of these polls also there's a question of frankness and how how people would admit to doing that, which is why I think these are flawed. I mean, this poll makes me angry on a lot of different levels, just that they did it. But I think that there's how open you would be, and there's no way to measure who is more frank. But within the Democratic Party, it's much more difficult in this day and age
to admit to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that you see a decline in the Democrats who have a problem with it because you see a die-off of older Democrats who came up at a time when the Democratic Party was more aligned with the South than it is now.
They call it here's what they call social desirability bias, right? That people are like, if you ask a Republican who might be a little more racist, he might conceal it, right? That he is, because he knows the rap that Republicans get. My point about this stuff normally is that it's not the individual people in the party and how racist they are. It's that at the top of the party, or as party policy, do they endorse what would be considered racist policies, or do they fight against them? And in the current state, well, since Nixon, the Republican Party has been not only endorsing but pushing racist policies with the Southern strategy to right now today where they're suppressing the vote all across the country. And of course the birth certificate thing, which was endorsed at the top of the ticket by Mitt Romney, that was also racist. So it's not about how many individual racists in each party, it's about which party is fighting against racism and trying to heal the wounds of racism in our country, and which party is still pushing racism as a way to gain power, and that would be the Republican Party.
And that's absolutely right. And to add one more thing onto that, who do racists vote with? Every group of out racists in the country, for the most part, and they are supporting the Republican Party, and they're supporting them in the South. Why did they break away? Why did Lyndon Johnson ruin the South for the Democrats? People allege because all of the racists in the South would never vote for a Democrat again because of those policies. So, and where do David Dukes? They sprout up and they're Republicans, and so that's you run into that much more often than you do. I would say almost unanimously between Republicans.
You mean
Democrats.
Cliven Bundy, not part of the Rainbow Coalition?
I haven't seen him there. He's a push guy, but I don't know if he's really part of the coalition.
So it's great that you guys brought up the social desirability bias. It's something that every time you do a survey, you have to try to get around that if you can. And I can say that the GSS, as I said, has been around for decades and decades, and to whatever extent social scientists can get around that, they have implemented that in the GSS. You see there, whites who say blacks are more unintelligent than intelligent. Again, the numbers there are very close together, like within the margin of error, effectively. Very similar, whites who say blacks are more lazy than hardworking. Again, the gap not that significant, about 10 percentage points at the most.
This is I think the irresponsible part of taking a poll like this.
Yes.
Because, then you ask a question like that, you're perpetuating
yes.
a dangerous stereotype, a horrible stereotype. Why ask a question like that? Who benefits from knowing which political party thinks that black people are more lazy. I
Well,
mean,
understand that they didn't-
it's an ugly way to ask. It's a question that we don't need answered. I don't care. I'm not a better person for knowing that more Republicans or more Democrats
let me
feel
answer
that way.
So they didn't ask, are you a Republican and what do you think about this? They asked people a number of different demographic questions about their age, their race, their religion, and then they went on to ask them hundreds of other questions. And so this allows us to see, okay, well, what do old people say in response to this as opposed to young people?
How does this help societally? Honestly,
if you want to understand the nature of racism in the country, if you want to understand the intersection,
but we know that. We know that the nature of racism is intellect, it is taught, it is tolerance. It has nothing to do with, yes, there are people that are trained to think that black people are lazier, that Spanish people are illegal, that white people should be in charge. All of that. But that doesn't, I mean, these polls, we don't get better as a society. We don't get better as a society fighting racism because we know that X number of people think that black people are lazy. I just think it's a terrible way to ask.
So, why wouldn't they ask a question like, do you think Asians are shitty drivers and are Puerto Rican women looser than Mexican women? I mean, that's the kind of bullshit question you wouldn't ask. Those are disparaging, stereotypical, racist questions, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and we don't profit from knowing the results. A poll, I think, is interesting when you say, oh, here, we need to pay attention to this. We need to change this. Oh, this is better than I thought it was. This doesn't matter. This doesn't change my day. This doesn't change race in America.
Right.
Okay, I fundamentally disagree on every part. I mean, look, you bring up the possibility of this, when you ask it to people, it might reinforce a stereotype. That's totally true. But they talk to 2,000 people every 4 years. That doesn't really impact that many people when you think about it. About the loose women thing, that doesn't impact government policy. People thinking that blacks are lazier or don't deserve more government money, that then go on to vote for politicians who agree with that impacts those groups through government policy.
Right, but okay, but we know that already. So we know that the backwards morons who are racist in this country and adhere to ideas like that are whoever they vote for, whatever the number is of people who feel that way, I don't care. It doesn't help the conversation about race, because that is a fringe opinion in America. So even giving it the space in a survey to talk about, I think, does a disservice to the betterment of race relations in the country. I don't care if people think that.
Okay, I mean, again, I disagree about the fringe thing. I mean, we have a chart. I mean, in 1992, the numbers are above 60% for both self-described Democrats and Republicans. But you see that the number goes down by half.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because that shows a trend of tolerance. That shows that teaching tolerance.
Well, I would say that many of these charts show a downward trend.
Yeah, but I'm not arguing with every single chart we're seeing. I'm talking about the one specific one just now before this one that talks about laziness, which has no place in this. That's interesting stuff right there.
Okay, can I have one more defense?
Yeah.
The reason that they ask questions like that is
it's indefensible, by the way. You can totally
if you ask someone, do you hate black people, that's going to trigger social desirability. But if you ask them, do you have this negative affectation towards this person or this negative affect, then that is one way to tap into racism without cluing the racist into that's what you're doing.
Right, that's fine, but I don't think, John, that does that. I don't think I think social desirability comes in the same way. I mean, the person who has a hard time saying that they hate black people, I'm guessing this is not science, is still going to have a hard time saying that they think black people are lazy. I actually would be more interested in seeing numbers about that direct question, do you hate black people? Because the people who are saying yes are being quite honest, so that if 4% of America actually admits to hating black people, that's, I don't know what that number would do to me, but at least there's something interesting there. The other is about nothing.
Okay, I mean, we come at it from very different points of view. I spent 5 years in graduate school.
Incorrect.
Now, I'm not saying correct or incorrect. I'm saying that I went to graduate school to study these sorts of things because I think that information is valuable. It may not always turn out to be very useful, but I do think that
John,
it's valuable.
You're not listening to me, though. I totally agree that information is valuable. But not all information is valuable just because it's information. So I don't think that question is valuable at all. I think that a lot of this survey is valuable. I think they've been around for, 100 years now, just like as long as the White House Correspondents'
This one's been going back since 72. There's also the Ains, which has been going back to the 40s and 50s.
I don't, even though I only have a bachelor's degree and I didn't go to graduate school, I did go to the University of Virginia, which is like 2 graduate degrees. So I'm not belittling what you studied and what you worked in, but I'm just saying there are questions that help us, and there are surveys that help us. This, by and large, on balance, probably helps us. That question, I think, it does a lot of damage to this survey.
Okay, well, I think, look, I don't have to agree. You've made your point. I think that you've defended it well.
Can I make one point about this? That
sure.
Once again, I totally forgot you were here. He's like Ted Cruz now.
He
didn't like that.
You didn't like that.
I'm laughing at it though.
Wolf Blitzer too.
No, you did a Ted Cruz, a Wolf Blitzer. Yeah, Don. Hey, Trumpy, why don't you make your point, Trumpy?
But what they did was, how was that?
That was good. It was better.
Charming.
But they say the discouraging thing about this is that racism or racist tendencies in America have been on a decline, which is good, but it hasn't been declining during the Obama years. Now, why do you think that is? I'm going to guess because there's a political party that's half of the country whose interest in it is to keep stoking racial fear and prejudice. That's why. That's, he's the other. He's different. He's not American. He's a Muslim. He doesn't like Jesus.
Yeah.
He doesn't like America. He's not one of us. So that's probably why. And
that's true, and it's a reaction to tolerance too. So it makes the people, right? Yeah, exactly. If the black people are in the background and the Democrats like them more than we do, that's fine. But once they come to the foreground, we have to react to that and to the fact that they're being more tolerant, and that we see, in our estimation, the country slipping away. If you're a conservative crazy.
Yeah, I think that's the most likely possible reason. Also, bear in mind that Barack Obama being elected in that year is not the only major thing that happened. We also had a huge economic recession, and it could be that in times of trouble with the economy, people become more sort of jealous for the resources that they see in the government going to outgroups. And so, look, we disagree on whether this is particularly interesting, I guess, or enlightening information. The reason I wanted to show it to you, though, is so that you will know that whether it's the economy or it's racial animus, the GSS and the AINS and other surveys like these data sets are available. If you want to sort of learn more about politics, you can use all of this different data and test hypotheses. That is free for you to do. It's all available online. Go down in the comments and let us know what you think.